Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to explain a very interesting and intense drama called The Reaper Returns. This story follows Rosa Moretti, a woman who was once feared across the entire city as the Ruthless Reaper. But after making a promise to her dying mother, Rosa gave up her violent past and spent 10 years trying to live a peaceful and respectable life. Unfortunately, the people around her mistake her kindness for weakness. Her husband Evan betrays her, his foster sister Lily repeatedly humiliates her, and eventually, they become involved in a much darker conspiracy against the Moretti family. But they have no idea that the woman they are provoking is the same Rosa Moretti who once made the entire city tremble. So, what happens when Rosa finally decides to stop being patient? Let's find out as we explain the complete story of The Reaper Returns from beginning to end. Stay with me till the end, because this story is full of revenge, betrayal, hidden identities, and shocking twists. 10 years earlier, Rosa Moretti was not the kind of girl anyone dared to insult. At only 13 years old, she had already experienced something that would have broken most people. Her father, Don Moretti, had a mistress who caused terrible suffering for Rosa's mother. When Rosa saw her mother drugged and bleeding for days, something inside the young girl changed forever. Her father wanted the matter hidden, but Rosa refused to remain silent. She walked into the mistress's courtyard carrying a gun and shot her in front of everyone. That single act shocked the entire city. People realized that Rosa was not an ordinary daughter of the Moretti family. She was fearless, cold, and willing to do what even grown men were afraid to do. 2 years later, when the mistress's son came looking for revenge, Rosa struck first again. She entered his room with poison and ended the threat before he could reach her. From that day onward, the city gave her a name that would follow her for years, the Reaper. But Rosa's violent life eventually came to an end because of the one person she could never refuse, her mother. While lying on her deathbed, Rosa's mother took her daughter's hand and asked her to stop living with blood on her hands. She did not want Rosa to spend the rest of her life surrounded by revenge and fear. Instead, she wanted her daughter to find happiness, build a peaceful family, and live like an ordinary woman. Rosa listened to those final words carefully. For her mother, she put down her gun and walked away from the violent world she had known since childhood. For the next 10 years, she changed herself completely. She became a respectable lady, devoted herself to charity, and allowed the people of the city to slowly forget the terrifying girl they once called the Reaper. By the time Rosa was 28, she believed she had finally succeeded. She was engaged to Evan Shaw, the decent-looking heir of the powerful Shaw family. Evan appeared gentle and respectful, and Rosa thought perhaps this was the peaceful life her mother had wanted for her. But during the engagement dinner, that illusion began to crack. Almost everyone important in the city had gathered to celebrate the couple, including political and business figures who knew about Rosa's old reputation. Then a young woman named Lily suddenly appeared with an empty bowl in her hands. Without even showing a trace of respect, Lily had spilled soup across Rosa's dress and then called her an old woman. The entire hall became silent because everyone understood how dangerous it was to humiliate Rosa Moretti in public. But Lily clearly had no idea who she was dealing with. Rosa calmly asked who Lily was, and Lily proudly introduced herself as Evan's foster sister. She continued insulting Rosa, questioning why someone as old as her deserved Evan. Rosa expected Evan to defend his fiancée, but instead, he simply smiled and told her that Lily was young and full of spirit. He asked Rosa not to bother with her. Those words sounded harmless, but Rosa quietly repeated them in her mind. She had spent 10 years trying to become a patient and peaceful woman, so she decided not to react. She remembered her mother's final wish and told herself that she would not allow an immature girl to drag her back into the life she had left behind. After the dinner ended, Lily still refused to stop. As she passed Rosa, she deliberately looked at the ruined dress and suggested that Rosa should change it. Then she added another cruel insult, implying that Rosa needed a younger body. Evan was standing nearby, yet once again he said nothing. Rosa watched them leave together, while her loyal companion Na struggled to control her anger. Na had known Rosa since childhood and understood exactly how dangerous Rosa could become when pushed too far. But Rosa placed a hand over Na's clenched fist and reminded her that her mother had wanted her to live a good life. At that moment, Rosa still believed patience was the right choice. However, Rosa's peaceful marriage did not remain peaceful for long. During the first 3 days, Evan behaved like the perfect husband. He kissed Rosa good morning, spoke politely, and even made coffee for her. But on the 4th day, Lily arrived at Rosa's estate with several carloads of luggage. She did not ask permission. She simply began ordering the movers around and announced that Evan had told her she could stay there. Evan soon arrived and explained that Lily had been under his care since childhood, so she should be allowed to live in the East Wing. Rosa understood exactly what was happening. Lily had already taken control of part of her home, and Evan was using kindness as an excuse to force Rosa into accepting it. Still, Rosa nodded and allowed Lily to stay. Once Lily moved in, the estate slowly became chaotic. She replaced the chef because she disliked his food, changed the flowers without permission, and treated the servants as if they belonged to her. Whenever Rosa questioned her behavior, Evan defended Lily by saying that she was young and did not understand the rules. Rosa remained silent, but she began to see the truth behind Evan's gentle personality. Lily was not simply an annoying foster sister, and Evan was not simply a harmless husband trying to keep everyone happy. Something about their relationship made Rosa suspicious. That night, for the first time in 10 years, Rosa decided to contact someone from her past. She called Cole. Cole had been one of Rosa's most trusted and dangerous men. When Rosa abandoned her old life, Cole had pulled his people back into the shadows, but he never truly left her. When Rosa asked whether his men were still with him, Cole gave her a simple answer: 12 men, and not one was missing. 10 years had passed, but their loyalty had never disappeared. Rosa then gave Cole 2 tasks. First, she wanted him to investigate Lily's background and discover why the Shaw family had taken her in. Second, she wanted him to find out whether Lily and Evan were truly foster siblings or whether there was something more between them. Rosa had not yet decided to return to her old life, but for the first time in a decade, she was preparing herself for the possibility that she might need the Reaper again. And Rosa's suspicions were soon confirmed when Evan began taking an interest in her wealth. She owned 8 companies and a casino, all of which had been her property before the marriage. Evan suddenly suggested that managing so many businesses was too much for a woman and offered to take control of the revenue. Rosa did not argue. When the accountant came to ask for confirmation, Rosa simply told him to let Evan manage it. On the surface, it looked like she had accepted her husband's authority. But Rosa was not foolish. She was watching everything. She was giving Evan enough freedom to reveal exactly what he intended to do. 3 days later, Cole sent Rosa the information she had been waiting for. Evan had already diverted 40% of the monthly revenue into a Shaw family account. One transfer was even connected to a mysterious person named Leo. Rosa immediately understood that this situation was much bigger than a husband trying to control his wife's money. Meanwhile, Evan's father, Richard Shaw, came to the Moretti estate. He knew Rosa's history and understood that she was not someone to be played with. Rosa warned him directly that he knew what Evan and Lily were doing and that he had come to test how far her patience would go. Richard was terrified because he remembered the girl Rosa had once been. He left after Rosa gave him one final warning: tell his son to rein himself in while there was still time. But Evan did not listen. He had already convinced himself that the terrifying Rosa Moretti of 10 years ago was gone forever. To him, the woman who allowed Lily to insult her was simply a wealthy wife who would never fight back. That mistake would soon become the biggest mistake of his life. Because while Evan believed Rosa had become weak, Rosa was quietly gathering information, watching every move, and waiting for the moment when her enemies would reveal themselves. And the final warning came when Lily decided to attack the one person Rosa could never tolerate seeing harmed. Nah. The scream that came from the courtyard changed everything. Rosa had been sitting quietly in her study, writing letters and trying to maintain the peaceful life she had promised her mother she would live. But the sound was not ordinary. It was the voice of someone in serious pain, and Rosa immediately recognized it as Na. Her pen stopped in the middle of a sentence. For several seconds, she simply stared at the ink spreading across the paper. Then she placed the pen down and walked toward the courtyard. What she saw there made the calm expression disappear from her face. 2 men working for the Shaw family had Na pinned to the ground. Her clothes were torn, and her back had been struck repeatedly. Standing over her was Lily, holding a riding crop and smiling as if she were enjoying the scene. Lily complained that Na had refused to make her coffee and had not shown her enough respect. To Lily, Na was nothing more than a servant who needed to be taught a lesson. Lily became even more cruel when she noticed Rosa standing nearby. Instead of becoming frightened, she smiled and told Rosa that her servant had been disrespectful. She even mocked Rosa by asking whether she had come to save Na. Rosa did not answer immediately. She walked straight toward Na and crouched beside her. Na's face was bruised, her lip was bleeding, and her body shook from the pain, but she still refused to cry in front of Lily. Rosa gently moved the hair away from Na's face and then saw the injuries across her back. There were 7 lashes, and one wound was deep enough to expose the seriousness of the damage. Rosa touched the edge of one injury, and Na's body reacted violently. Blood appeared on Rosa's fingertips. She slowly stood up and looked directly at Lily. Her voice remained quiet when she asked one simple question: who had given Lily the right to do this? Lily was not intimidated. She threw the riding crop onto the ground and casually explained that she did not need anyone's permission because Evan had told her she could handle things however she wanted inside the estate. Rosa looked down at the blood on her fingers. 10 years ago, she had promised her mother that she would stop using violence. She had kept that promise through humiliation, financial betrayal, and Lily's constant disrespect. But now someone she loved had been physically harmed in her own home, and her husband had allowed it. Rosa finally realized that she had misunderstood her mother's wish. Her mother had asked her to live a good life, not to become a person who allowed others to destroy everything she cared about. The old Rosa had not disappeared. She had simply been waiting. Evan arrived soon afterward. Rosa was furious enough that for one moment she nearly grabbed Lily by the throat, but she stopped herself. Evan looked at Na's injuries without showing much concern. Lily immediately changed her attitude and pretended to be the victim. She claimed that Na had disrespected her and that she had only disciplined her. Evan accepted the explanation and told Rosa that Lily had gone a little too far, but he still defended her. He even suggested that servants sometimes needed discipline. Rosa stared at him in disbelief. 7 lashes had been used against a woman who had served Rosa faithfully for 20 years, and Evan could still describe it as a simple lesson in manners. Rosa said nothing. She turned around and walked back to her study, but inside her mind, the final decision had already been made. Once the study door closed, Rosa looked at the dried blood on her fingers. She slowly curled her hand into a fist. Then she called Cole. He appeared almost immediately, as if he had been waiting outside for exactly this moment. Rosa reminded him of something he had told her earlier, that her gun never rusted. Cole confirmed it. Rosa's eyes became cold, and she gave him the command he had been waiting 10 years to hear. She told him to polish it. That simple sentence meant the old Rosa Moretti was returning. The woman who had once terrified Greyport was no longer interested in pretending that she was powerless. That night, Rosa stayed beside Na while the best doctor treated her wounds. Na tried to convince Rosa that she was fine, but Rosa knew the truth. She carefully covered her with a blanket and promised that nobody would ever hurt her like that again. Na finally began to cry, not because she was weak, but because she understood what Rosa's decision meant. The Rosa she had known 10 years earlier had returned. For years, Na had watched Rosa suppress her anger and force herself to behave like a peaceful lady. Now she could see that Rosa was done allowing people to mistake kindness for weakness. But Rosa was about to receive another piece of information that would make her anger even stronger. Cole's investigation revealed that Evan and Lily were spending suspicious amounts of time together. Lily had moved into the East Wing, and Evan was visiting her there almost every night, often staying until after midnight. More disturbing was the way Lily spoke to him privately. She did not call him Evan. She called him Babe. Rosa stood near the window and watched the lights of the East Wing glowing in the darkness. Suddenly, many strange things began to make sense. Lily was not simply an annoying foster sister. Evan was not simply being overly protective of someone he had grown up with. There was something hidden between them. Rosa thought about everything she had sacrificed during the previous 10 years. She had given up violence because her mother wanted her to build a happy family. She had trusted Evan because she believed he was a decent man. She had tolerated Lily because she wanted to keep peace inside her home. Yet the man she married had treated her like a source of money, while the woman he defended had attacked the people closest to her. Rosa finally understood that mercy had not changed them. It had only made them bolder. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation left in her expression. They did not deserve her mercy. The next morning, Rosa began taking back control. She went directly to the finance office and demanded every statement connected to her property. The accountant was nervous because Evan had already told him that he would control the finances. Rosa reminded him that the property belonged to her before the marriage and that Evan had no right to take control of it. From that day forward, every financial decision required Rosa's signature, and Evan's authority was revoked. It was the first major blow against him. Evan had believed that Rosa would quietly hand over her wealth, but now he realized that his wife was no longer cooperating. Rosa then turned her attention to Lily. Lily was not a member of the Moretti family, nor was she the owner of the estate. She was only a foster sister under the care of the Shaw family. Rosa ordered her allowance to be stopped, her staff dismissed, and her car reclaimed. She also made it clear that Lily would have to follow the rules of the estate like everyone else. When Na asked what would happen if Lily created another scene, Rosa gave a simple answer. Put the rules on Lily's door. If she could read, she could understand them. Finally, Rosa dealt with the two men who had attacked Na. They were beaten, removed from the property, and permanently forbidden from returning. That evening, Evan stormed into the estate demanding an explanation. He was furious that Rosa had taken back control of her own money and removed Lily's privileges. But Rosa did not even look up from her book. She calmly explained that she was simply managing her own property and running her own estate. Evan tried to use their marriage as an argument, asking why things had to become so difficult between them. Rosa finally looked up and addressed him by his full name. She told him that she had married him because her father believed he was a good man, and she had tolerated Lily because her mother wanted her to live a good life. But that did not mean she would allow herself to lose her temper forever. Evan suddenly had nothing to say. Rosa gave him one final warning. If he ever allowed someone to put their hands on her people again, she would take back much more than financial authority. Evan understood that something had changed. He left the room without winning the argument, but Rosa knew he was not finished. He would not simply accept defeat. He would look for another way to fight back. And while Rosa returned calmly to her book, Lily was already furious in the East Wing. The cups and plates in her room were smashed one after another as she realized that the woman she had mocked was finally taking everything back. Neither Lily nor Evan understood, yet that these were only the first moves in Rosa's revenge. For the next few days, Rosa watched everything from a distance. She had already taken back control of her finances and removed the privileges Lily had been enjoying, but she knew that this would not be enough to stop them. Evan had become too comfortable with the idea that Rosa would always forgive him, while Lily had become convinced that the Moretti estate was slowly becoming her own home. Rosa understood that people like them rarely accepted defeat quietly. When they could no longer control someone through money or authority, they usually tried to damage that person's reputation instead. And Lily soon proved Rosa right. 3 days after Rosa stripped away Lily's privileges, Lily found another way to fight back. She used the Moretti family name to invite a group of important socialites to the estate for an afternoon tea gathering. The guests included influential women connected to judges, police officials, business leaders, and other powerful families in the city. Lily had no right to host such an event, but she behaved as though she had been given complete authority over the estate. By the time Rosa heard what was happening, the guests had already arrived. Na was furious when she explained the situation. Lily was sitting inside the parlor using Rosa's expensive tea set and telling everyone that Moretti family affairs were now hers to handle. Rosa listened without showing much emotion. Lily had crossed another line, but this time Rosa did not feel surprised. She simply decided to see the situation for herself. When she entered the parlor, the room immediately became quiet. Several women avoided her eyes because they knew they were sitting inside her home while Lily was pretending to be its hostess. But Lily remained seated confidently in Rosa's usual chair. Even worse, she was wearing a beautiful diamond tiara that immediately caught Rosa's attention. Rosa recognized it instantly. The tiara had belonged to her mother, who had once commissioned 2 of them before her death. One remained with Rosa's father, while the other had been kept safely inside Rosa's jewelry collection. Lily was wearing something that did not belong to her. Rosa did not shout or create a scene. Instead, she calmly complimented Lily on the beautiful tiara. Lily proudly claimed that Evan had given it to her. Rosa then revealed the truth. That tiara had been her mother's keepsake. The room immediately became uncomfortable. Rosa looked around at the guests and explained exactly what Lily had done. She was wearing her mother's jewelry, sitting in Rosa's seat, using Rosa's china, and telling everyone that she was the person responsible for the Moretti estate. The older women in the room instantly understood the seriousness of the situation. They knew the history of the Moretti family, and they knew that touching something belonging to Rosa's mother was not a harmless mistake. Rosa held out her hand and asked Lily to return the tiara. For the first time, Lily's confidence disappeared. She looked toward the door as if expecting Evan to appear and protect her, but Evan was nowhere to be seen. Slowly, Lily removed the tiara and placed it into Rosa's hand. Rosa then turned toward the guests and apologized for the poor hospitality. She explained that Lily did not yet understand the rules and that she should never have been allowed to host an event in Rosa's place. Instead of humiliating the guests, Rosa invited them to return for a proper dinner another time. One by one, they left the room quickly, clearly wanting no part in the conflict between Rosa and Lily. Once everyone had gone, Rosa looked at Lily one final time. Lily was still sitting in the chair, stunned by what had happened. Rosa walked toward the door and delivered a warning without even turning around. She told Lily that if she sat in that chair again, she might not get up from it. Then Rosa left the room. Lily immediately ran to Evan in tears, presenting herself as the victim. She had expected Rosa to remain passive forever, but now she had discovered that the woman she had mocked at the engagement dinner was becoming much more dangerous. Lily knew that she could no longer win through simple insults. She needed Evan to help her fight back. Evan soon came up with a different strategy. Instead of confronting Rosa privately, he decided to attack her reputation. 3 days later, he arrived with a well-known journalist and a member of the Chamber of Commerce. He accused Rosa of humiliating Lily, a supposedly defenseless young girl, and warned her that the story could destroy the Moretti family's reputation. Evan believed that Rosa would become frightened when faced with the possibility of public scandal. But he had forgotten something important. Rosa had survived much worse than gossip. She had once been feared throughout the entire city, and she had no reason to be afraid of a newspaper headline. Rosa looked directly at Evan and told him to publish the story if he wanted. Her confidence shocked all 3 men. Then she reminded Evan that more than half of Shaw Bank's deposits came from the Moretti family. If the Shaw family wanted to threaten the Morettis publicly, Rosa could simply remove the financial support that kept their institution strong. Evan's expression changed immediately. He had entered the room believing that he held the advantage, but Rosa had just shown him that the Shaw family depended heavily on the very woman they were trying to attack. That same afternoon, Rosa made her threat real. The Moretti family publicly announced that all business with Shaw Bank was being terminated and that their funds would be withdrawn. The news spread through Grayport almost instantly. Other customers saw what was happening and began questioning whether their own money was safe. Soon, a line formed outside Shaw Bank as people rushed to withdraw their funds. Rosa did not stop there. The Moretti Group opened its supply contracts for public bidding, while the Shaw Group was flagged for financial irregularities and suspended. Within only a few days, most of the Shaw Group's assets disappeared. Evan's attempt to intimidate Rosa had turned into a financial disaster for his own family. Richard Shaw was devastated. He had already warned Evan that Rosa was not someone he could safely provoke, but Evan had ignored him. Now the consequences were becoming impossible to stop. Richard came to the Moretti estate desperate to speak with Rosa, but the gates remained closed. Security delivered only one message. Rosa said that Richard had failed to stop the situation when he still had the chance, and now it was too late. Richard remained outside for hours before finally leaving. Meanwhile, the journalist who had threatened Rosa never published the story. The chamber member disappeared from the confrontation, and Evan himself stayed away from the estate. Rosa knew, however, that Evan's silence did not mean surrender. It meant he was planning something. She instructed her people to watch him closely. Then Cole arrived with information that changed the entire situation. His investigation into Lily had finally uncovered the truth about her identity. Lily was not simply a foster sister raised by the Shaw family. Her real surname was Vital. She was the daughter of the Vital family, an old enemy of the Morettis. Years earlier, the Vital family had been wiped out, but the Shaws had secretly rescued Lily, changed her identity, and raised her as their own. She had not entered Rosa's estate because she wanted a new family. She had entered it because she wanted revenge. The revelation became even more shocking when Cole explained that Lily's brother Leo was still alive. He was living in the city under another identity, disguised as a teacher. The two siblings secretly met twice every month, and Evan's driver had been helping them move around without attracting attention. Even more disturbing, Evan himself had met Leo. Rosa immediately understood that the strange financial transfers, Lily's behavior, and Evan's secret meetings were all connected. This was no longer simply a marriage falling apart. A much larger revenge plan was developing around the Moretti family. Cole then revealed their intended target, Don Moretti's upcoming 50th birthday gala. Leo planned to send people disguised as kitchen staff into the estate. They would poison the wine before the guests noticed anything. Evan would then enter the kitchen at the perfect moment, pretending to investigate the problem while secretly helping them cover their tracks. Once chaos spread through the party, another family would move in and help seize part of the Moretti territory. Evan's reward would be half of the Moretti family's territory. For Evan, this was the ultimate prize. He had already tried to control Rosa's money, but now he wanted to take everything from her family. Cole wanted Rosa to act immediately, but Rosa refused. If they arrested everyone before the plan began, Evan could still claim that he knew nothing. Rosa wanted the truth exposed publicly, with no possibility of denial. She walked to a closet and opened a drawer containing the black tactical gear she had not touched in 10 years. Everything had been carefully maintained. Her old life had been waiting for her. Rosa looked at the gear and knew exactly what she was going to do. She would allow her enemies to believe they were in control, while secretly preparing the entire battlefield around them. The next stage of their plan would take place at Don Moretti's birthday gala, and this time, Rosa would not be the victim. She would be waiting for them. The night before Don Moretti's birthday gala, Rosa stood alone in her private room and looked at the black tactical suit that had remained untouched for 10 years. To anyone else, it was simply an old piece of clothing, but to Rosa it represented a life she had promised her mother she would leave behind. She slowly ran her fingers across the fabric, remembering the girl she had once been. For 10 years, she had chosen patience over violence, forgiveness over revenge, and peace over power. But now the people around her had turned that peaceful life into a battlefield. Evan had betrayed her trust, Lily had attacked Na, and the Vital siblings were preparing to strike her family during her father's birthday celebration. Rosa knew that if she waited any longer, innocent people could be caught in the middle. Yet instead of stopping the enemies immediately, she decided to let their plan continue. She wanted every person involved to reveal themselves before she ended it. Cole entered the room carrying the latest information. His investigation had confirmed that Leo Vital was preparing the final stage of the operation. Several men connected to the Vital family had already been positioned around the city, while others were preparing to enter the birthday gala disguised as workers. Their plan was simple on the surface, but dangerous enough to cause complete chaos. They intended to contaminate the wine served during the celebration and use the confusion to create an opening against the Moretti family. Evan would be close enough to help them from inside, while Lily would remain in a position where she could pretend to know nothing about the attack. Rosa listened to every detail without interrupting. When Cole finished, she simply asked him one question. How many people could they trust inside the gala? Cole answered that their own people were already prepared. Rosa had no intention of allowing the enemy to control the environment. She instructed Cole to quietly replace several members of the security team and position trusted men throughout the building. The important thing was that no one should realize they were being watched. Rosa wanted Leo and his allies to believe that everything was proceeding exactly according to their plan. If the enemy became suspicious too early, they might escape before exposing the full conspiracy. So Rosa made one thing clear. Nobody was to interfere unless she gave the order. Her father's birthday party would continue normally, the guests would be welcomed, the food would be served, and the music would play as if nothing were wrong. Behind the scenes, however, every entrance and exit would be monitored. Meanwhile, Evan was becoming increasingly confident. The financial damage Rosa had caused to the Shaw family had left him angry, but he believed that the birthday gala would finally give him a chance to reverse everything. He secretly communicated with Lily, making sure their stories matched. Lily promised that she would remain calm and act as though she had no idea about the plan. Evan told her that once the Moretti family fell, they would finally have the power they had always wanted. But Lily was more emotionally driven than Evan. Her hatred toward Rosa had become personal. She was no longer satisfied with simply taking revenge for her family. She wanted Rosa to suffer for humiliating her, taking away her privileges, and exposing her in front of powerful people. Evan tried to remind her that they needed to remain patient, but Lily's anger was becoming difficult to control. At the Moretti estate, preparations for Don Moretti's birthday continued. Guests began arriving from across the city, including powerful business leaders and people connected to the political and criminal worlds. Everyone knew the celebration would be one of the largest gatherings of the year. Don Moretti was not only celebrating another year of his life, he was also celebrating the continued strength of his family. Rosa stayed close to her father, but she did not tell him every detail of the conspiracy. She knew that if too many people knew the truth, someone might accidentally reveal it. Don could see that his daughter was different that evening. There was a coldness in her eyes that reminded him of the Rosa from 10 years earlier. He quietly asked whether something was wrong. Rosa simply told him that everything would be fine and asked him to enjoy his birthday. The guests continued to arrive, and Lily appeared in an elegant dress, behaving as though she were still an important member of the household. She greeted several people confidently, pretending that the recent conflict with Rosa had never happened. Evan stayed nearby, carefully watching the staff and the security arrangements. He was looking for any sign that Rosa had discovered the plan. But Rosa gave him nothing. She spoke politely, smiled at the guests, and behaved like the peaceful woman she had been for the past 10 years. Evan began to relax. In his mind, Rosa still did not know what was coming. That confidence was exactly what Rosa wanted. Then the kitchen staff began preparing the drinks. Among them were several men secretly working for Leo. They moved carefully, pretending to be ordinary workers. One carried trays toward the dining area, while another watched the doors. A third person checked the bottles before they were taken outside. They believed they had entered the most heavily protected property in the city without being discovered. But every move was already being observed by Cole's people. The men did not arrest them because Rosa had ordered them to wait. The trap needed to close at exactly the right moment. As the evening progressed, Rosa noticed Evan disappearing for short periods. Each time he returned, he acted as if nothing had happened. Rosa did not follow him immediately. Instead, she allowed him to believe he was safe. At one point, Evan approached her and asked whether she was enjoying the celebration. Rosa smiled and told him she was. Evan then said that perhaps they should forget about all their recent arguments and start over. Rosa looked at him for several seconds before agreeing. She told him that after the party, they could talk about their marriage. Evan interpreted her words as surrender. In reality, Rosa had already decided what would happen to their marriage. There would be no second chance for a man who had secretly plotted against her family. Lily soon approached Rosa as well. She pretended to be nervous and asked whether Rosa was still angry about everything that had happened. Rosa told her that anger was not important anymore. Lily seemed relieved. She believed Rosa had finally become tired of fighting. But when Lily walked away, Rosa's expression changed. She quietly watched Lily move toward Evan, confirming once again that the two were communicating in secret. Rosa now understood that both of them were waiting for something to happen. She only needed to wait a little longer. The birthday ceremony finally began. Don Moretti stood before the guests while everyone raised their glasses to celebrate him. The atmosphere was cheerful, and nobody outside Rosa's inner circle knew that danger was already inside the building. The first round of drinks was served. Rosa carefully watched the staff. One of the suspicious workers moved toward the main table, but before he could reach it, Cole's man quietly blocked his path and redirected him toward another section of the room. The worker did not realize that the movement had been deliberate. Rosa watched from across the hall and knew the enemy's plan was beginning to collapse without them even realizing it. Then Rosa received the signal she had been waiting for. Cole had discovered that the main attacker was inside the building. Leo Vital himself had entered under his false identity. The man who had spent years hiding in the city was now standing only a short distance from the people he blamed for destroying his family. Rosa looked across the crowded hall and spotted him. Their eyes did not meet, but Rosa knew exactly who he was. She had finally seen the man behind Lily's entire revenge plan. Leo was confident because he believed nobody knew his identity. He moved toward the area where the attack would begin, preparing to make his final move. At the same time, Evan quietly approached another part of the building, ready to help create the confusion. Lily remained near the guests, pretending to be completely innocent. Everything appeared to be going according to their plan. But Rosa had already turned their entire operation into a trap. She quietly left the main hall and entered a private room where Cole was waiting. He asked whether they should move now. Rosa shook her head. She wanted Leo to make the first move. She wanted Evan to expose himself. She wanted Lily to reveal how deeply she was involved. Then Rosa looked toward the hallway and calmly said that tonight, everyone who had betrayed her would finally understand the difference between the woman they thought they knew and the woman she had once been. A few moments later, the lights in one section of the building suddenly went out. Several guests became confused, and a servant shouted that something was wrong near the kitchen. Evan immediately moved toward the disturbance, exactly as planned. Lily followed from a distance. Leo began giving silent signals to the men he had brought inside. The attack had officially begun. But this time, the Moretti family was ready. And as Rosa stepped out of the shadows wearing the black tactical gear she had not touched in 10 years, Cole looked at her and understood what everyone else was about to learn. The Reaper had finally returned. The lights suddenly went out across one side of the hall, and for a few seconds, confusion spread among the guests. People began whispering while the music stopped in the middle of the celebration. Some guests stepped away from the tables, while others looked toward the doors, wondering what had happened. Evan immediately moved toward the kitchen, exactly as he had planned, pretending to be concerned about the safety of everyone inside. Lily remained close to the guests, wearing an expression of fear that looked convincing enough to anyone who did not know the truth. But behind that frightened face, she was waiting for the moment when the Moretti family would finally fall into chaos. What neither of them realized was that Rosa had already positioned her people throughout the building. The darkness was not a disaster for the Morettis. It was the beginning of their trap. Cole quietly moved through the shadows while his men secured the important entrances. Every suspicious person who had entered disguised as kitchen staff was being watched. The attackers believed they had the advantage because the guests were confused, but their movements were being monitored from every direction. Rosa stood in the private corridor, dressed in the black tactical clothing she had taken out after 10 years. Her expression was completely different now. The gentle woman who had spent years trying to avoid conflict was gone. She looked exactly like the woman whose name had once terrified the city. Cole approached her and quietly reported that Leo had begun moving according to the plan. Rosa nodded. She did not want him captured yet. She wanted him to believe that the assassination attempt was still under his control. Meanwhile, Evan entered the kitchen and immediately noticed that something was wrong. The men he expected to be waiting for him were not where they were supposed to be. He looked around nervously and asked what had happened. One of the workers tried to explain that the power failure had created confusion, but Evan could sense that something was different. He secretly checked his phone and saw that several of his messages to Lily had not been answered. For the first time that evening, Evan felt a small amount of fear. He had expected Rosa to be completely unaware of the plan, but now the atmosphere inside the estate felt strangely controlled. Lily also began to panic. She quietly approached Evan and asked whether everything was going according to plan. Evan told her to remain calm and act normally, but Lily could see the uncertainty in his eyes. She asked where Leo was, but Evan did not have an answer. They had expected Leo to control the attack from inside the building, yet suddenly their communication had become difficult. Lily began realizing that something had gone wrong. Still, she refused to believe that Rosa could have discovered them. In her mind, Rosa had spent 10 years living like an ordinary woman. Lily believed that the old Reaper was nothing more than a frightening story from the past. She was about to discover how badly she had underestimated her enemy. At that moment, the lights returned. The entire hall suddenly became bright again, and everyone froze. The guests looked around and realized that nobody had been seriously harmed. The food was still on the tables, the glasses were still standing, and Don Moretti was still alive. The supposed chaos had failed to produce the opening Leo needed. Then the doors of the main hall opened slowly. Rosa walked in. She was no longer wearing the elegant dress she had worn earlier. Instead, She appeared in the black tactical outfit that had once become a symbol of fear throughout the city. Her hair was tied back, her expression was cold, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what was happening. The guests immediately became silent. Even those who had never personally witnessed Rosa's old life recognized the meaning of what they were seeing. Some of the older members of the city's powerful families remembered the stories. They remembered the young woman who had once been called the Reaper. Don Moretti looked at his daughter with surprise. He knew Rosa had been preparing for something, but even he had not expected to see her return to the appearance and attitude of her former self. Rosa walked toward him and calmly asked whether he was all right. Don nodded. Rosa then turned toward the guests and apologized for the interruption, explaining that there had been a small security issue. But everyone in the room could feel that this was not a simple security problem. Something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Then Rosa looked toward the kitchen. Her eyes stopped on one of the men who had entered disguised as staff. The man immediately tried to move away, but two of Cole's men blocked him. Another suspicious worker attempted to escape through a side entrance, only to find that the door was already secured. Within seconds, the attackers realized that they were trapped. Their carefully planned operation had been turned against them. Leo watched from the other side of the hall, and the confidence slowly disappeared from his face. He finally understood that someone had known about the plan before the attack even began. Then Rosa looked directly at him. Leo froze. Rosa did not need to say his name. The expression on her face told him that his identity had already been discovered. Leo slowly stepped backward, but Cole appeared behind him. The escape route was gone. Leo tried to remain calm and insisted that he was simply a teacher who had been invited to the celebration. Rosa smiled slightly and asked why a teacher had been meeting Lily twice a month and why Evan's driver had been transporting him around the city. Leo's face changed immediately. He realized that Rosa knew far more than he had expected. Lily heard the conversation and began moving toward them. She desperately tried to interrupt Rosa, claiming that Leo had nothing to do with her. Rosa turned toward her and asked a simple question. If Leo was just a stranger, why had Lily been meeting him secretly for so long? Lily could not answer. Her silence was enough. Evan finally entered the hall. The moment he saw Leo surrounded by Cole's men, he knew everything was over. But instead of admitting the truth, he tried to act shocked. He asked Rosa what was happening and why she had brought armed men into her father's birthday party. Rosa looked at him for several seconds before calmly reminding him that he had been warned. Evan tried to deny knowing anything about the attackers, but Rosa had already prepared evidence. Cole handed Rosa the financial records showing the transfers Evan had made to the hidden accounts connected to Leo. Rosa showed the documents to the guests. The room erupted in whispers. The man who had presented himself as a respectable heir was now standing in front of everyone with evidence of his involvement in a conspiracy against the Moretti family. Evan immediately claimed that the transfers had been misunderstood. He said that he had only been trying to protect Lily and had never planned to hurt anyone. Rosa asked him whether that was also why he had secretly met with Leo. Evan said nothing. Rosa then asked Lily the same question. Lily finally broke down and began blaming Evan. She claimed that he had promised to help her family, that he had told her Rosa would never discover the truth, and that he had convinced her everything would work. Evan immediately turned against Lily, accusing her of creating the entire situation. Within seconds, the two people who had spent months working together were blaming each other to save themselves. Rosa watched them argue without showing any emotion. This was exactly what she had wanted. She had not needed to torture them or force them to confess. She had simply allowed their fear to destroy their loyalty to each other. Lily eventually admitted that she was not truly a Shaw. She revealed that her real surname was Vital and that she had entered the Shaw family because she wanted revenge against the Morettis. She also admitted that Leo was her brother. The entire room fell silent. Don Moretti finally understood why Rosa had been so suspicious. The Vital family had been considered dead for years, but two of its members had survived. They had spent years hiding and waiting for the opportunity to strike. Lily had entered the Shaw family, gained access to Evan, and eventually used him to get close to Rosa. Evan, blinded by money and ambition, had willingly joined them because he believed he would receive part of the Moretti territory after the family was destroyed. Leo suddenly made one final attempt to escape. He pushed one of the men beside him and ran toward the side door. But Cole was already waiting. Within moments, Leo was stopped and brought back into the hall. Rosa looked at him and told him that his revenge had failed because he had made the same mistake as everyone else. He had assumed that because she had chosen peace, she had become weak. Rosa then turned toward Evan. For 10 years, she had given him her trust, and he had mistaken that trust for weakness. The birthday celebration was no longer a celebration. It had become the moment when every hidden betrayal surrounding Rosa was finally exposed. But Rosa knew that the night was not over yet. There was still one final question she needed to answer. What would she do with the husband who had betrayed her and the woman who had brought an old enemy back into her life? The Reaper had returned. Now everyone was about to see what she would do next. The entire birthday hall had fallen silent. A few minutes earlier, everyone had been celebrating Don Moretti's birthday, but now every guest was watching Evan, Lily, and Leo as their carefully hidden secrets came crashing into the open. Rosa stood calmly in the center of the room, while Cole and his men kept the attackers under control. Evan looked from Lily to Leo and then toward Rosa, desperately trying to find a way out of the situation. He had spent so much time believing that Rosa was too gentle to fight back that he had forgotten the most important thing about her. She had never lost her power. She had simply chosen not to use it. Now that choice was over. Evan tried one final time to present himself as innocent. He claimed that he had only been helping Lily because she was his foster sister and that he had never intended to harm Rosa or Don Moretti. He insisted that the financial transfers were innocent and that he had no idea what Leo was planning. But Rosa had already collected enough evidence to destroy his excuses. She showed everyone that Evan had been secretly transferring money and communicating with people connected to the Vital family. She also revealed that he had been involved in the plans surrounding the birthday gala. Every explanation Evan gave only made him look more desperate. Lily quickly realized that Evan was no longer useful to her. The moment she understood that Rosa had uncovered the truth, she turned against him. She accused Evan of being the one who had convinced her that everything would work. According to Lily, Evan had promised that Rosa would never discover their plan and that once the Moretti family was weakened, he would receive a large portion of their territory. Evan immediately denied it and accused Lily of manipulating him. The two people who had secretly worked together for so long were now trying to save themselves by blaming each other. Rosa simply watched them. She did not need to interrupt. Their own fear was forcing the truth out of them. Then Lily finally admitted the secret that had been hidden behind her entire identity. She was not truly the innocent foster sister everyone believed her to be. Her real surname was Vital. She belonged to the same family that had been connected to an old conflict with the Morettis. Lily explained that her family had suffered years earlier and that she had been taken in by the Shaw family. From the outside, she had grown up as Evan's foster sister, but privately she had never forgotten what happened to her family. She had waited for the right opportunity to return and take revenge. Rosa listened carefully as Lily continued. She explained that her brother Leo had survived as well. For years, the two siblings had lived under hidden identities. Leo had eventually taken on the appearance and life of a teacher, allowing him to remain in the city without attracting attention. Lily secretly met with him, and the two of them planned their revenge. Evan became an important part of their operation because he was already inside Rosa's family through his marriage. Their plan had been simple. Evan would gain access to Rosa's wealth and information, while Lily would remain close enough to observe the Moretti household. When the opportunity came, Leo and the others would strike. But there was one thing Lily had never understood. Rosa had spent 10 years living peacefully, but she had not spent those 10 years forgetting her past. She knew exactly what people were capable of. She knew how revenge worked, how conspiracies were built, and how people behaved when they believed they had found a weakness. Lily had assumed that because Rosa no longer carried a gun openly, she no longer knew how to fight. That assumption had allowed Rosa to watch them without becoming suspicious in their eyes. While Lily and Evan were celebrating their supposed victory, Rosa was quietly gathering evidence. Leo suddenly shouted that the Morettis had destroyed his family first. He argued that everything he and Lily had done was justified because they were simply taking back what had been taken from them. His anger was genuine, but Rosa did not accept his reasoning. She told him that revenge could never erase the past. It only created another cycle of destruction. Leo insisted that Rosa was responsible for everything that happened to the Vital family. Rosa replied that if he truly believed he had justice on his side, he would not have needed to poison drinks, hide his identity, or enter her father's birthday party with an assassination plan. Leo became silent. Don Moretti then stepped forward. He looked at Lily and Leo carefully, recognizing the surname they had hidden for so long. He understood that their survival had been connected to events from many years earlier. But instead of arguing with them, he asked why they had chosen to involve innocent people in their revenge. Leo had no answer. Their hatred had become so powerful that they had stopped caring who was caught in the middle. They had been willing to sacrifice servants, guests, and even people who had nothing to do with the original conflict. Rosa then turned her attention toward Evan. Unlike Lily and Leo, Evan had no family revenge to explain his actions. He had chosen betrayal for a completely different reason: ambition. He had seen Rosa's wealth and the power of the Moretti family and decided that marriage could give him access to both. When Rosa refused to hand over control of her companies, he began looking for another path. Lily and Leo offered him exactly what he wanted. If the Moretti family fell, Evan believed he could claim a large share of their territory and rebuild the Shaw family's position. Rosa asked Evan one question. After everything she had done for him, how could he betray her so easily? Evan struggled to answer. He tried to say that their marriage had become complicated and that he had only made mistakes because he felt trapped. Rosa rejected the excuse. She reminded him that she had trusted him with her home, her name, and her life. When he saw her kindness, he did not protect it. He saw an opportunity to exploit it. That was what hurt Rosa more than the money. She could forgive an enemy for attacking her, but Evan had pretended to love her while secretly preparing to destroy everything she cared about. Lily suddenly shouted that Rosa was acting like a victim even though her family had caused the original suffering. Rosa looked at her calmly and said that Lily had every right to hate her if she believed the Morettis had wronged her family. But she did not have the right to attack innocent people. She had beaten Na, manipulated Evan, entered Rosa's home under false pretenses, and helped organize an attack during a family celebration. At that point, revenge was no longer about justice. It had become an excuse for cruelty. Cole then brought forward additional evidence. He had records of Lily's secret meetings with Leo, information about Evan's financial transfers, and details connecting the suspicious workers inside the gala to the vital siblings. The evidence was enough to make the situation impossible to deny. Even the guests who had once admired Evan were now looking at him with disgust. Richard Shaw, who had arrived after hearing about the chaos, stood at the edge of the room in shock. His son had not simply made a bad marriage decision. He had placed the entire Shaw family in danger. Richard approached Rosa and apologized for failing to control Evan earlier. Rosa listened, but did not immediately forgive him. She reminded Richard that he had warned Evan once, but after that, the Shaw family had continued to benefit from Evan's actions. Richard lowered his head. He understood that there was nothing he could say that would undo the damage. Then Rosa looked toward Lily. Lily was crying now, but Rosa did not feel the same anger she had felt earlier. The truth had changed everything. Lily was still responsible for what she had done, but Rosa could now see that much of her life had been shaped by hatred and revenge. Rosa told her that the Vital family's tragedy did not give her permission to destroy another family. If Lily had wanted justice, she should have searched for the truth instead of becoming exactly the kind of person she claimed to hate. Leo suddenly tried to move toward Rosa, but Cole's men stopped him. Rosa raised one hand, ordering them to hold him. She walked closer to Leo and told him that the game was over. He had entered the Moretti estate expecting to control the outcome, but now every secret had been exposed. The Reaper had not returned because Rosa wanted blood. She had returned because she refused to allow anyone else to decide the fate of her family. The birthday gala ended that night under heavy security. The guests were escorted out safely, while Evan, Lily, and Leo were taken away to face the consequences of their actions. Rosa remained behind with her father and Na. The house was quiet again, but Rosa knew that her old life had permanently returned. She had spent 10 years trying to escape the name Reaper, only to discover that she could not run forever from the person she had become. Yet there was still one unfinished matter. Rosa had to decide what would happen to Evan, because unlike Leo and Lily, he had not come looking for revenge. He had simply chosen betrayal. And for Rosa, that betrayal was much harder to forgive. The morning after Don Moretti's birthday gala felt completely different from every other morning Rosa had known. The house was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The events of the previous night had changed the balance of power between the families forever. Evan, Lily, and Leo had been exposed, and the Shaw family was already beginning to collapse under the weight of the scandal. Rosa stood near the large windows of the estate, looking outside while the city slowly woke up. For 10 years, she had tried to build a life where she did not have to look over her shoulder. She had wanted a simple marriage and a quiet home. Instead, the people she trusted had brought the violence she had escaped directly back to her doorstep. Na entered the room carefully. Her injuries were still painful, but she refused to remain in bed. She asked Rosa what would happen to Evan. Rosa did not answer immediately. Evan was not a stranger, and he was not an enemy who had attacked her family from outside. He was the man she had married. She had shared meals with him, trusted him, and believed that he would protect her. Now she knew that while she was trying to create a peaceful future, Evan had been secretly calculating how much of her family's wealth he could take. That betrayal was difficult for Rosa to accept. Meanwhile, Richard Shaw was desperately trying to protect what remained of his family. The Shaw Group had already suffered enormous financial damage after Rosa withdrew the Moretti family's support and business contracts. Now Evan's involvement in the conspiracy had made the situation even worse. Business partners were distancing themselves, investors were demanding answers, and people who had once respected the Shaw name were now questioning how such a powerful family could have become involved in a plot against the Morettis. Richard understood that there was no simple apology that could repair the damage. He went to Rosa's estate and asked to meet her privately. Rosa eventually agreed. When Richard entered the room, he looked exhausted. The confident businessman who had once tried to maintain control over his family was now struggling to find the right words. He apologized for Evan's actions and admitted that he had underestimated the seriousness of his son's relationship with Lily. Rosa listened without interrupting. Then she told Richard that she had warned him before. She had given him a chance to control Evan when the situation was still manageable. He had failed. Now the consequences belonged to the Shaw family. Richard asked Rosa not to destroy the entire family because of Evan's mistakes. Rosa replied that she had never attacked the Shaw family simply because she disliked them. She had reacted to their actions. Evan had used her wealth, supported Lily when Lily abused Na, and participated in a plan that threatened her father. The Moretti family had every reason to protect itself. Richard lowered his head and accepted that Rosa was right. Before leaving, he asked whether there was anything he could do to save Evan. Rosa gave him a cold answer. Evan had already chosen his path. Now he had to face where that path had taken him. Inside the room where Evan was being held, he was no longer the confident man who had once walked through Rosa's estate as though he owned it. He kept asking to speak with Rosa. He insisted that he could explain everything, but every explanation sounded weaker than the one before. He said that he had been pressured by Lily. Then he claimed that he had only wanted to save the Shaw family. Finally, he admitted that he had wanted control over part of the Moretti territory. Each version of his story revealed another piece of his greed. When Rosa finally entered the room, Evan immediately stood up. He tried to approach her, but the guard stopped him. Rosa told them to step back. Evan looked at her and said that he was sorry. He reminded her of the good moments they had shared and asked her to remember that he had once loved her. Rosa stared at him quietly. She told him that love could not exist alongside the kind of betrayal he had committed. If he had simply fallen out of love with her, she could have accepted it. If he wanted a divorce, she could have signed the papers. But he had chosen to stay beside her while secretly planning to take everything from her family. Evan tried to argue that Lily had manipulated him. Rosa shook her head. She told him that Lily might have given him the opportunity, but he had made every decision himself. Nobody had forced him to transfer her money. Nobody had forced him to meet Leo. Nobody had forced him to participate in the plan against Don Moretti. Evan had chosen those things because he wanted more power. That was why Rosa could no longer believe anything he said. For the first time, Evan seemed to understand that there was no way back. He asked Rosa whether she could at least spare the Shaw family. Rosa told him that she had no interest in destroying people who had not been involved. But the people who had actively betrayed her would not simply walk away without consequences. The Shaw family would lose the influence it had gained through Moretti's support, while Evan would no longer have access to Rosa's property or finances. Their marriage was effectively over. Elsewhere, Lily was facing the reality of her own situation. She had spent years building an identity as a member of the Shaw family, but now everyone knew she was a vital. The elegant life she had enjoyed was gone. The luxury, the parties, and the status she had taken for granted had disappeared almost overnight. She kept thinking about the first time she had met Rosa and how confidently she had insulted her. At the time, Lily had believed Rosa was simply an older woman who had become soft after years of living comfortably. Now she understood that Rosa had been giving her chance after chance to stop. Leo was equally furious. He blamed Rosa for everything and refused to accept that his revenge had failed because of his own mistakes. But Rosa did not argue with him. She told Cole to make sure Leo was handled according to the consequences of his actions. Leo had entered the gala with a plan to attack the Moretti family. Whatever pain he had suffered in the past, he had chosen to continue the cycle instead of finding another way to deal with it. As the day continued, Rosa finally sat with her father. Don Moretti looked at his daughter and asked whether she regretted returning to her old identity. Rosa remained silent for a moment. She knew her mother had wanted her to leave that world behind. She also knew that her mother had never wanted her to become a victim. Rosa told her father that she had tried to live peacefully for 10 years. She had kept her promise as long as she could. But peace was not something she could create alone. If the people around her continued to attack her family, she had to protect them. Don understood. He told Rosa that perhaps her mother had not wanted her to forget who she was. Perhaps she had simply wanted her daughter to choose her own path rather than being controlled by violence. Rosa looked down and thought about her mother's final words. For the first time, she began to understand them differently. Her mother had never asked her to become weak. She had asked her to become happy. And Rosa realized that there was a difference. That evening, Rosa visited Na again. She apologized for what had happened and promised that Lily would never be able to hurt her again. Na smiled and told Rosa that she did not blame her. She knew Rosa had spent 10 years trying to protect everyone without becoming the person she used to be. Rosa thanked her for staying loyal. Their conversation reminded Rosa that the people who truly cared about her had never needed her wealth or power. They had simply wanted Rosa herself. Meanwhile, the final consequences for the Shaw family began taking shape. Their businesses lost major contracts, their reputation collapsed, and people who once sought their friendship began avoiding them. Richard was forced to deal with the consequences of decisions made by his son. Evan's future was no longer connected to Rosa's family. The marriage that had once seemed like a powerful alliance had become one of the biggest failures in Shaw family history. But Rosa knew there was still one thing she needed to do. She needed to close the chapter of her life that Evan had destroyed. She removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. For 10 years, she had believed that marriage would prove she had finally escaped her past. Now she understood that her past was not the thing she needed to escape. She needed to understand it. She had been the Reaper, but she was also Rosa Moretti, the daughter, friend, and woman who wanted a peaceful life. The difference now was that she would never again confuse peace with helplessness. And as Rosa walked away from the ring, Cole quietly appeared at the doorway. He told her that the city was already talking about her return. People who had forgotten the name Reaper were remembering it again. Rosa looked toward the night sky and simply replied that she was not returning to the old life. She was only making sure nobody ever forced her back into it again. The days following Don Moretti's birthday gala were filled with rumors throughout the city. Everyone was talking about what had happened at the celebration, but nobody knew the complete story. Some people said the Shaw family had attempted to betray the Morettis. Others whispered that the Vital family had returned from the dead. But the most common rumor was about Rosa. People were saying that the woman who had disappeared from the violent world 10 years ago had finally returned. The old name, the Reaper, began spreading through the city again. Rosa heard the rumors but paid little attention to them. She had no desire to become famous or feared again. Her only concern was making sure that the people she loved were safe. At the Moretti estate, security was increased dramatically. Cole placed trusted men around the property, but Rosa did not want the house to become a prison. She told him that everyone should be able to live normally again. Cole reminded her that their enemies had already shown how far they were willing to go. Rosa agreed that caution was necessary, but she also knew that fear could not control her life. For 10 years, she had tried to escape the shadow of the Reaper. She did not want to replace one prison with another. Na slowly recovered from her injuries. She still had pain in her back, but she refused to complain. Rosa personally checked on her every day, making sure she received proper treatment. Their relationship became even stronger after the attack. Na told Rosa that she had been afraid when Lily attacked her, but she had never been afraid of Rosa. She had always known that Rosa would protect her. Rosa smiled and told her that she should never have been forced to suffer in the first place. She blamed herself for allowing Lily to remain in the estate for so long. Na immediately disagreed, telling Rosa that she had been trying to honor her mother's wishes. Sometimes, people take kindness as permission to hurt others, and that was not Rosa's fault. Meanwhile, Evan's situation became worse. The Shaw family had lost much of its influence, and Evan no longer had access to the Moretti wealth he had once expected to control. He repeatedly requested another meeting with Rosa, hoping that he could somehow convince her to forgive him. Rosa eventually agreed, but this time there was no emotion between them. Evan asked whether she truly intended to end their marriage. Rosa answered that the marriage had already ended the moment he chose to betray her. The paperwork was simply the final step. Evan tried to remind Rosa that they had once been happy together. Rosa admitted that there had been moments when she believed they were happy, but she explained that she could no longer separate those memories from the truth. While she had been trying to build a future with him, Evan had been secretly planning to take her family's wealth. He had allowed Lily to mistreat people inside their home, and he had helped people who wanted to attack her father. Rosa told him that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. She could forgive him one day, but she would never trust him again. Evan finally realized that there was nothing left to save. He removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. Rosa looked at it for a moment before taking off her own ring. She placed it beside his without saying anything. The marriage was over. There was no dramatic argument, no shouting, and no tears. After everything that had happened, the silence between them felt more powerful than any fight could have been. Across the city, the Shaw family was dealing with its own collapse. Richard tried to save what he could, but the damage to the family's reputation was enormous. People no longer saw the Shaw name as powerful. They saw it as a name connected to betrayal. Richard privately regretted that he had not stopped Evan earlier. He had known that Rosa was dangerous to provoke, but he had underestimated how serious Evan's ambitions had become. Now Richard understood that his son had destroyed the very future he had wanted to protect. Lily, meanwhile, was forced to face the consequences of living under a false identity. She had spent years believing that revenge would finally give her peace. Instead, it had left her with nothing. The Shaw family no longer accepted her as one of their own, while the vital family she had spent years trying to avenge was already gone. She had sacrificed her future for a revenge plan that had failed before it could achieve its goal. When Rosa eventually came face to face with Lily again, Lily expected anger. Instead, Rosa remained calm. Lily asked why Rosa was not celebrating her defeat. Rosa replied that there was nothing to celebrate. Revenge had already taken enough from everyone. Lily asked whether Rosa hated her. Rosa answered honestly. She had hated what Lily had done, but hatred was not something she wanted to carry for the rest of her life. Lily could not understand how Rosa could remain so calm after everything that had happened. Rosa explained that she had already spent years living with hatred. She knew exactly where it led. It had made her powerful, but it had also taken away part of her childhood. She had become the Reaper because she believed violence was the only language her enemies understood. Her mother was the only person who had convinced her that another life was possible. That conversation changed something inside Rosa. She finally understood that her mother's wish had never been about forcing her to become weak. Her mother wanted her to have a choice. 10 years ago, Rosa had believed that becoming peaceful meant becoming harmless. Now she understood that true peace meant having the strength to protect herself while still choosing not to destroy everyone who stood against her. Cole later came to Rosa with another report. He told her that some people connected to the old vital conflict had disappeared from the city. There was a possibility that other enemies might still be watching the Morettis. Rosa listened carefully but refused to return to a life of constant revenge. She told Cole to keep an eye on the situation, but she did not want unnecessary violence. If someone came after her family, they would deal with the consequences. But Rosa would no longer chase enemies simply because of their past. Don Moretti was proud of his daughter. He told her that she had changed more than anyone realized. Rosa asked whether he thought she was becoming the old Reaper again. Don smiled and said that the old Rosa had never truly disappeared. She had simply grown older and wiser. The difference was that now she understood when to use her strength and when to put it away. For the first time in many years, Rosa felt free. She was no longer Evan's wife. She was no longer trying to prove that she could live like an ordinary woman. She was not hiding from the name Reaper, but she was not controlled by it either. She was simply Rosa Moretti, a woman who had survived betrayal and chosen her own future. That evening, Rosa returned to the room where she had stored her old tactical equipment. She opened the drawer and looked at the gun that had once defined her life. Cole stood behind her and waited for instructions. Rosa picked up the weapon, examined it for a moment, and then placed it back inside the drawer. Cole understood. Rosa was not afraid of the gun anymore. She simply did not need it every day. And that was the greatest difference between the young girl who had once become the Reaper and the woman standing there now. The young Rosa had believed power meant never showing weakness. The woman she had become understood that real power meant having the choice to walk away. But just when Rosa thought the worst was finally behind her, a message arrived that would remind her that the past was never completely finished. Someone had discovered that the Reaper had returned, and they were coming to find her. The message arrived just after midnight. Rosa was sitting alone in her study when Cole entered and placed a small envelope on the desk. There was no name written on it, no return address, and no explanation of how it had reached the heavily guarded Moretti estate. Rosa opened it carefully and found only a single photograph inside. The picture showed an old building that had been abandoned for years, but what caught Rosa's attention was the symbol painted across its wall. She recognized it immediately. It belonged to a group connected to one of the darkest chapters of her childhood. Rosa stared at the photograph for several seconds before asking Cole where it had come from. Cole admitted that his people had traced the message to an unknown sender, but whoever delivered it had managed to avoid every security camera around the estate. That meant someone dangerous had been watching them for some time. Rosa did not panic. Instead, she asked Cole whether anyone from the old network had recently appeared in Greyport. Cole said there had been rumors about several unfamiliar men arriving in the city, but none of them had made a direct move against the Moretti family. Rosa understood what that meant. Whoever had sent the photograph was not trying to attack her yet. They wanted her to know that they were there. It was a warning, but it was also an invitation. Someone wanted Rosa to remember the past she had spent 10 years trying to leave behind. The following morning, Rosa visited her father and showed him the photograph. Don Moretti became unusually quiet when he saw it. He immediately recognized the symbol as well. He told Rosa that the group connected to it had disappeared many years ago after a major conflict. Everyone believed their leader was dead. Rosa asked whether her father had ever been certain of that. Don admitted that he had never found a body. For the first time, Rosa realized that one of the most dangerous enemies from her childhood might have survived all these years. The revelation changed the way Rosa looked at everything that had happened recently. The Vital family's revenge had seemed like the final threat, but perhaps it had only been a distraction. Lily and Leo had been focused on the Morettis because of their own family tragedy, while someone else may have been watching from the shadows. The timing was too perfect. Just as Rosa had exposed Evan, Lily, and Leo, this new message had arrived. It felt as though someone had been waiting for Rosa to reveal herself before making a move. Cole wanted to increase security around the estate immediately. Rosa agreed, but she also told him not to make their movements predictable. If their enemy was watching, they needed to know whether that enemy would follow them. Rosa decided to leave the estate that afternoon and visit the old building shown in the photograph. Cole objected, saying it could be a trap. Rosa simply replied that if it was a trap, then the person who prepared it had already succeeded in getting her attention. She wanted to know who was behind it before they had a chance to choose the next battlefield. Rosa arrived at the abandoned building just before sunset. The place looked exactly like it had in the photograph. Broken windows covered the walls, weeds grew through cracks in the ground, and the old symbol remained visible across the front entrance. Cole and several trusted men checked the surrounding area, but there was no immediate sign of danger. Rosa stepped inside alone. The air was cold, and every sound echoed through the empty halls. She remembered being young, angry, and frightened in places like this. Back then, she had believed that surviving meant becoming harder than everyone around her. Now she knew that survival could mean something completely different. Inside one of the rooms, Rosa found another photograph. This one showed her mother. Rosa froze. The photograph had been taken many years ago, but the message written beneath it was recent. It said only that Rosa had inherited more from her mother than she realized. Rosa immediately understood that the person behind the message knew far too much about her family. This was not a random enemy. Someone had studied her history carefully. Cole entered the room and saw the photograph. His expression changed. He asked Rosa whether they should leave immediately. Rosa nodded, but before they could move, the lights suddenly turned on. A voice came from somewhere deeper inside the building. The person speaking knew Rosa by name and called her the Reaper. Rosa did not answer. She simply stood still and listened. The voice explained that Rosa had spent 10 years hiding from herself. It said that Evan, Lily, and Leo were only small pieces of a much larger game. Their failed attack had exposed Rosa's return to the violent world, and now the people who had been waiting for her finally knew where to find her. Rosa asked who was speaking. The voice laughed and said that she would recognize the name when the time came. Then the building went dark again. Cole immediately moved Rosa toward the exit while his men searched the surrounding rooms. But the mysterious enemy had already disappeared. There was no person to capture, no clear trail to follow, and no useful evidence left behind. Only the photograph remained. Rosa looked at it again and felt something she had not experienced in years: genuine uncertainty. Back at the estate, Rosa began investigating her mother's past. She discovered several old records that had been hidden away. Some contained names she had never heard before, while others mentioned meetings between her father and powerful figures from the city. One name appeared repeatedly, but had been crossed out from nearly every document. Rosa asked Don Moretti about it, but he initially refused to answer. She pressed him until he finally admitted that the man had once been one of the family's closest allies. His name was Marcus Vale. Marcus had disappeared after Rosa's mother died. At the time, everyone believed he had fled because he feared being blamed for the conflict that had destroyed several families. But Don now admitted that Marcus had been far more involved than Rosa had ever known. He had information about the attack that had changed Rosa's childhood, and he may have known the truth about the people responsible. Rosa felt betrayed all over again. Her mother had spent years trying to protect her from the violent world, but there were still secrets surrounding her death and the destruction of the family. Rosa asked her father why he had never told her. Don explained that her mother had specifically asked him to keep certain details hidden. She wanted Rosa to have a chance at a normal life. Don had honored that request for 10 years. Rosa finally understood why the mysterious message had mentioned her mother. Whoever was behind it knew the secrets her mother had tried to bury. If Marcus Vale was alive, he might hold answers that could change everything Rosa believed about her past. Cole investigated Marcus's whereabouts and discovered something shocking. A man using a different name had recently purchased property near the edge of Grayport. The property was connected to an old company that had once worked with the Moretti family. Rosa immediately knew they had found their lead. But she also knew this enemy was different from Evan, Lily, and Leo. Evan had been driven by greed. Lily and Leo had been driven by revenge. Marcus appeared to be driven by something much deeper. He had waited 10 years for Rosa to return. That meant he probably understood her better than anyone else. Rosa decided not to confront him immediately. Instead, she ordered Cole to watch the property and identify everyone entering and leaving. She wanted to know what Marcus was planning before revealing that she had discovered him. For the first time since becoming the Reaper again, Rosa was not reacting to an attack. She was preparing for one. That night, she returned to the room where she kept her old gun. She opened the drawer, but did not remove it. She simply looked at it and remembered her mother's voice. Rosa finally understood that the greatest challenge was not becoming the Reaper again. The real challenge was making sure the Reaper never controlled her life again. Outside the estate, an unknown man stood across the street watching the lights in Rosa's room. He held an old photograph of Rosa's mother. Then he smiled and quietly said that Rosa had finally come home. And somewhere in the darkness, the next chapter of her past was already waiting. The next morning, Rosa woke with one thought in her mind: Marcus Vale. For years, she had believed that the most painful parts of her childhood were already behind her. She had accepted that some questions might never be answered, especially questions concerning her mother and the enemies who had once surrounded the Moretti family. But now the mysterious messages, the old photographs, and Marcus's sudden appearance had reopened wounds Rosa had spent a decade trying to close. She knew she could not ignore him. If Marcus had truly been connected to the events surrounding her mother, then finding the truth was no longer about revenge. It was about finally understanding why her mother had sacrificed so much to protect her. Cole continued watching the property connected to Marcus. For several hours, nothing happened. Then one of his men reported that an elderly woman had entered the building carrying a small box. She stayed inside for nearly an hour before leaving through a back entrance. Cole investigated the woman's identity and discovered that she had once worked for Rosa's mother. Rosa immediately asked him to bring her to the estate. When the woman arrived, she looked nervous, but the moment she saw Rosa, tears appeared in her eyes. She had known Rosa since she was a child, and she had been carrying a secret for many years. The woman explained that Rosa's mother had known Marcus was dangerous. She had never trusted him completely, even when he appeared to be helping the Moretti family. Years earlier, Marcus had discovered information about a hidden financial network connected to several powerful families. He wanted control of that network, but Rosa's mother refused to give it to him. Instead, she tried to expose the people involved. That decision created enemies for her, and Marcus became one of the most dangerous people standing against her. Rosa listened in silence. Suddenly, memories from her childhood began making more sense. She remembered her mother receiving strange phone calls and becoming worried whenever certain names were mentioned. She remembered nights when security around their home suddenly increased. At the time, Rosa had been too young to understand why. Now she realized that her mother had been trying to protect her from a conspiracy that reached much deeper than the Moretti and Vital families. The woman then handed Rosa the small box she had brought with her. Inside were several letters written by Rosa's mother. They had been sealed for years, with instructions that they should only be given to Rosa if Marcus ever returned. Rosa's hands trembled slightly as she opened the first letter. Her mother explained that she had always known Rosa possessed a fierce nature. She feared that if Rosa learned the full truth too young, she would choose revenge instead of living her own life. That was why she had asked Rosa to stay away from the violent world. But the final letter contained something even more shocking. Rosa's mother revealed that the attack which destroyed so much of their family had not been caused by a single enemy. Several powerful people had worked together. Marcus had helped them, but he had eventually turned against them because he wanted the entire network for himself. Rosa's mother had discovered his betrayal and threatened to expose him. That was why Marcus had disappeared after her death. He had been afraid that someone would eventually uncover the truth. Rosa closed the letter and stared into the distance. For years, she had believed that becoming the Reaper had been the result of one terrible moment. Now she realized that her entire childhood had been surrounded by people manipulating events from the shadows. Her mother had not simply wanted her to stop using violence. She had been trying to prevent Rosa from becoming trapped in the same cycle that had destroyed her own life. Cole asked whether Rosa wanted him to bring Marcus to her. Rosa shook her head. She wanted to confront him herself. That evening, Rosa went to the property under heavy but discreet protection. She entered the building alone, while Cole and his men remained nearby. Inside, she found Marcus waiting for her. He was older than she remembered, but there was something familiar about his expression. He smiled when he saw her and called her by the childhood nickname her mother had used. Rosa immediately became cold. She asked him why he had sent the photographs. Marcus replied that he wanted to see whether Rosa still remembered who she was. He said that the city had spent 10 years believing the Reaper was gone, but he had always known that Rosa could never completely escape her nature. Rosa told him that he was wrong. She had not returned because she enjoyed violence. She had returned because people had attacked her family and forced her to defend herself. Marcus laughed. He told her that was exactly what he had expected her to say. Then he revealed that Evan, Lily, and Leo had never been the real target of his plan. They had simply been useful pieces. Marcus had watched their movements and allowed the conflict to grow because he wanted Rosa to reveal herself. He knew that once the Reaper returned, other enemies would become frightened and begin making mistakes. Rosa realized that the entire recent conflict had been more complicated than she thought. Marcus then offered her a deal. He claimed that he possessed information about the people responsible for her mother's death. If Rosa wanted the complete truth, she would have to work with him. He said that together they could destroy the remaining members of the old network and take control of the city. For a moment, Rosa said nothing. 10 years earlier, she might have accepted. The old Rosa would have wanted revenge immediately. She would have taken the opportunity to destroy everyone responsible. But the woman standing in front of Marcus was different. She had learned what revenge had done to Lily and Leo. She had seen how Evan's greed had destroyed his own future. She had watched people become prisoners of their hatred. Rosa told Marcus that she did not want his power. She wanted the truth. Marcus smiled and said that the truth always came with a price. Rosa answered that she was willing to pay it, but she would never become his weapon. Marcus suddenly pulled out a weapon, but Rosa was faster. She moved aside before he could use it and disarmed him. The confrontation was brief, but it proved something important. Rosa did not need to become cruel to remain dangerous. She simply needed to know what she was capable of. Cole and his men entered the building immediately after hearing the struggle. Marcus was surrounded, but Rosa stopped Cole from taking him away. She wanted Marcus alive because he still possessed information that could uncover the final pieces of the mystery. Marcus finally admitted that the people connected to the old network were still operating in Greyport. Some had powerful positions in business, some had connections to law enforcement, and others had spent years hiding behind respectable identities. He told Rosa that the Moretti family had only defeated one part of the enemy. The real confrontation was still coming. Rosa looked at Marcus and told him that he had made one mistake. He had assumed she would return to the past simply because he showed it to her. But Rosa was no longer the frightened 13-year-old girl who needed revenge to survive. She was 28 years old. She had survived betrayal. She had protected her family. And she had finally learned how to control the Reaper instead of becoming controlled by her. Marcus was taken away, but before leaving, he gave Rosa one final warning. The people above him already knew she had returned. They would not wait quietly while she investigated them. Rosa returned to the estate and placed her mother's letters beside the old gun. She looked at both for a long time. One represented the life her mother wanted her to choose. The other represented the life she had once believed was necessary. Rosa finally closed the drawer containing the weapon. She would uncover the truth. But this time, she would do it on her own terms. And somewhere across Greyport, the remaining members of the old network received the news they had feared for 10 years. The Reaper was no longer hiding. She was coming for the truth. The news that Rosa had discovered the truth spread through Greyport faster than anyone expected. Marcus Vale had been captured, but before his arrest he had already warned the remaining members of the old network that the Reaper was back. Rosa knew this meant they would not remain hidden for long. They would either run or make one final attempt to silence her. Instead of waiting for them to choose, Rosa decided to force them into the open. She gathered Cole, Don Moretti, and the few people she trusted most, and explained everything she had learned from her mother's letters and Marcus. The Vital family had been only one piece of the old conflict. Evan had been nothing more than a greedy opportunist, and Marcus had been manipulating events from the shadows. But now the people who had survived from that old network had one common problem. Rosa knew they existed. Cole wanted to launch an immediate attack against them, but Rosa refused. She had learned from the mistakes of her enemies. Rushing into a fight would only give them an opportunity to disappear. Instead, she ordered Cole to spread information that she had discovered nothing important from Marcus. The city needed to believe that Rosa was still searching for answers. Meanwhile, Cole quietly tracked every person connected to Marcus's old network. One by one, hidden meetings began appearing on his reports. Men who had remained invisible for years suddenly started moving money, contacting old allies, and preparing escape routes. Rosa watched everything carefully. Her enemies were frightened, and frightened people always made mistakes. At the same time, Evan made one final attempt to contact Rosa. He sent a message asking for forgiveness and claiming that he now understood how badly he had betrayed her. Rosa read the message but did not answer. Evan had spent months believing that he could manipulate her emotions, but that power was gone. Rosa no longer needed his apology. She had already accepted that their marriage was finished. What Evan wanted was not forgiveness. He wanted protection. He knew that the Shaw family was collapsing and that his connection to the Morettis was the only thing that might save him. Rosa refused to give him that opportunity. Lily also sent a message. Unlike Evan, she did not ask Rosa to save her. She simply admitted that she had been wrong. She said that hatred had controlled her for years and that she had believed destroying the Moretti family would somehow bring her own family back. Instead, she had lost everything. Rosa read the message quietly. She did not respond, but she understood Lily better now. Rosa had once been controlled by the same emotion. The difference was that Rosa had been lucky enough to have her mother pull her away from that darkness before it consumed her completely. Meanwhile, Marcus revealed the location of a private meeting where several members of the old network planned to gather. Rosa knew this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Instead of sending her men alone, she decided to go herself. Don Moretti objected immediately. He had already watched his daughter return to a dangerous world once and did not want to lose her again. Rosa told him that she was not the 13-year-old girl who had once picked up a gun because she had no other choice. She was going because she finally understood the enemy and because she had people beside her who would protect her. The meeting took place inside an abandoned warehouse outside the city. Several powerful men had gathered there, believing they were discussing how to remove Rosa before she became too dangerous. They spoke about her as though she were still the frightened child they remembered. One man claimed that Rosa had become soft after 10 years of peace. Another said that her marriage had weakened her. They laughed about the fact that she had trusted Evan. None of them realized that their conversation was being monitored. Rosa listened from a nearby room. When the men finally began discussing an attack on the Moretti estate, Rosa stepped into the warehouse. Every conversation stopped. The men turned toward her in shock. Rosa walked forward calmly, with Cole following behind her. She did not shout or threaten anyone. She simply told them that they had spent 10 years waiting for the Reaper to disappear, but they had misunderstood what had happened. She had not disappeared. She had chosen a different life. The moment they attacked her family, they had made that choice impossible. One of the leaders laughed and told Rosa that she was alone. Rosa looked around the warehouse and smiled. Then the lights came on throughout the building, revealing Cole's people surrounding every exit. The men suddenly realized that they had walked into Rosa's trap. The leader reached for his weapon. Rosa stopped him before he could move. The confrontation that followed was fast and intense. Cole's team disarmed the attackers while Rosa moved directly toward the man responsible for keeping the old network alive. He tried to intimidate her by reminding her that people like him had controlled Greyport long before she became the Reaper. Rosa told him that was exactly why his time was over. He had spent years believing that fear gave him power. Now the same fear was turning against him. The man tried to escape through a hidden passage, but Rosa had already discovered it. She stopped him at the exit and demanded the truth about her mother. For the first time, the man lost his confidence. He admitted that Rosa's mother had been targeted because she discovered the network's activities and refused to cooperate. Marcus had betrayed her because he wanted control of the organization. The other leaders had allowed it because they believed Rosa's mother would eventually expose them all. Rosa stood completely still. For years, she had wondered why her mother had been forced to suffer. Now she finally had the answer. Her mother had not been weak. She had been brave enough to stand against people far more powerful than herself. That realization affected Rosa more than any revenge could have. She told the leader that he had spent years believing he had destroyed her family, but he had actually created the woman who would eventually expose everything. Then she stepped away and allowed Cole's men to take him into custody. By the end of the night, the old network had been shattered. Their hidden accounts were exposed, their businesses were investigated, and the people who had protected them were forced to answer questions. Greyport slowly began discovering how deeply the organization had influenced the city. What had once seemed like a collection of unrelated tragedies was revealed to be part of a much larger struggle for power. When Rosa returned home, Don Moretti was waiting for her. He did not ask how many enemies she had defeated. He simply asked whether she was all right. Rosa nodded. Then she finally cried. Not because she had lost. Because for the first time, she understood that she no longer needed to carry her mother's death as a wound inside herself. Her mother had sacrificed everything to give Rosa a chance at a different life. Rosa had finally understood the meaning of that sacrifice. Cole stood quietly nearby, knowing that the woman who had returned as the Reaper was not the same woman who had once left. Rosa had faced her past, uncovered the truth, and defeated the people who had spent years hiding behind it. Now only one decision remained. What would she do with the rest of her life? Would she return permanently to the world of power and violence? Or would she finally choose the peaceful future her mother had wanted for her? Rosa looked at the old gun one final time. Then she closed the drawer. This time, she did not need to keep it close. The Reaper had won. But Rosa Moretti had finally found her freedom. After everything that had happened, Rosa finally returned home with a feeling she had not experienced in years: peace. The old network had been exposed, Marcus had been captured, Evan's betrayal had come to an end, and the Vital family's revenge had collapsed. For the first time, Rosa could look around the Moretti estate without expecting another attack. The same house that had once felt like a battlefield was slowly becoming a home again. Na was recovering, Don Moretti was safe, and the people who had tried to destroy the family were no longer in control of their lives. Yet Rosa knew that winning the final battle did not automatically erase everything she had experienced. She still carried the memories of her childhood, her mother, her marriage, and the 10 years she had spent trying to become someone else. One morning, Rosa returned to her mother's old garden. It was the place where she had spent many quiet moments as a child, long before she became known as the Reaper. She sat beneath the same tree where her mother had once told her that a person's life should not be measured by how many enemies they could defeat. Rosa remembered those words clearly now. For years, she had misunderstood them. She thought her mother wanted her to forget her strength and become completely peaceful. But now Rosa understood that her mother had simply wanted her to have a choice. She could be powerful without being cruel. She could protect herself without living for revenge. She could walk away from violence without being afraid of the person she had once been. Don Moretti eventually joined her in the garden. He did not say much. He simply sat beside his daughter. After several minutes, Rosa told him that she finally understood why her mother had asked her to leave the old life behind. Don smiled and said that her mother had always believed Rosa was capable of more than becoming a weapon. Rosa looked toward the sky and quietly admitted that she had spent years thinking she had failed her mother. Don told her that she had not failed. She had survived. She had protected her family. And most importantly, she had chosen her own future instead of allowing her enemies to choose it for her. Meanwhile, the consequences of the previous events continued spreading throughout Greyport. The old network was being investigated, its hidden financial operations were being exposed, and powerful people who had believed themselves untouchable were finally facing the consequences of their actions. The Moretti family regained control of the businesses that had been threatened, while the Shaw family was forced to rebuild without the influence it had once enjoyed through Rosa's marriage. Evan no longer had access to Rosa's wealth or family connections. His greatest mistake had been believing that Rosa's love made her weak. By the time he understood the truth, there was nothing left for him to take. Lily's story ended very differently. After everything was exposed, she had lost the identity she had spent years protecting. She was no longer the innocent foster sister of the Shaw family, but she was also no longer hiding behind the name Vital. She had to face the consequences of her actions and finally accept responsibility for the people she had hurt. Rosa did not personally seek revenge against her. She had already learned that revenge could destroy the person seeking it just as easily as the person receiving it. Lily would have to live with her choices and learn from them. Rosa believed that sometimes the strongest punishment was forcing someone to face the truth about themselves. Evan eventually understood the same thing. He had believed that money and power could guarantee his future. He had married Rosa thinking that her wealth would make his family stronger. He had supported Lily because he believed their revenge would give him control over the Moretti territory. In the end, he lost everything because he could not recognize the value of what he already had. Rosa had given him trust, loyalty, and a genuine chance at happiness. He traded all of that for ambition. When he finally looked back, he realized that the thing he had wanted most had never been money. It had been the life he had destroyed himself. Cole remained by Rosa's side, just as he had for all those years. One evening, he approached her and asked whether she still wanted him to keep the old weapons and equipment ready. Rosa looked at him and smiled. She told him to keep them secure, but she did not want them brought out unless they were truly necessary. Cole understood immediately. Rosa was not denying the Reaper anymore. She was simply refusing to let that identity control her. She could still be dangerous when someone threatened her family, but she no longer needed violence to prove her strength. Na eventually returned to work, although Rosa refused to let her do anything too difficult. Their relationship had become more like family than employer and servant. Na often teased Rosa about how serious she had become, and Rosa occasionally laughed in response. Those small moments meant more to Rosa than any victory over her enemies. They reminded her why she had fought so hard in the first place. She had not wanted power. She had wanted to protect the people who mattered to her, and live without fear. One afternoon, Rosa received a final letter from her mother. It was one of the letters that had been hidden for years and discovered during the investigation into Marcus. Rosa opened it alone. Her mother wrote that she knew Rosa would one day become strong enough to protect herself. She also knew that Rosa might eventually feel guilty for the things she had done in the past. But her mother wanted her to understand that a person should not spend an entire lifetime being punished by their own memories. The past could explain who someone became, but it did not have to decide who they would become next. Rosa read the letter twice. Then she cried. For the first time, the tears were not caused by anger, betrayal, or grief. They were tears of relief. She finally felt as though she had received permission to stop fighting. That evening, Rosa walked to the same room where she had kept her old tactical equipment. She opened the drawer one final time. The gun was still there. The black clothing was still carefully stored. Everything that had once represented the Reaper remained exactly where she had left it. Rosa touched the weapon for a moment. Then she closed the drawer. She did not throw it away. She did not destroy it. She simply left it behind. Because she no longer needed to prove that she was the Reaper. She already knew who she was. Rosa Moretti had been a frightened child. She had become a ruthless young woman. She had disappeared for 10 years because she wanted to honor her mother's final wish. She had married a man she believed she could trust and discovered that even love could hide betrayal. She had faced enemies from her past, uncovered secrets about her mother, and survived a conspiracy designed to destroy her family. But in the end, her greatest victory was not defeating Evan, Lily, Leo, Marcus, or the old network. Her greatest victory was defeating the part of herself that believed she needed revenge to feel complete. Rosa stepped outside and looked toward the garden. The sun was setting. Don Moretti was waiting for her. Na was preparing dinner. Cole stood nearby, quietly watching over the estate. For the first time in years, Rosa smiled without forcing it. She finally had the life her mother had wanted for her. Not a life without danger. Not a life without painful memories. But a life where she could choose what came next. And somewhere deep inside, the Reaper was still there. She would always be there. But now Rosa was the one holding the reins. The woman who had once been feared throughout the city had finally learned that true strength was not about destroying everyone who stood against you. Sometimes, true strength was knowing when to put the weapon down. And with that realization, Rosa Moretti finally walked toward the future she had spent 10 years trying to find.